all these almost 1,000-year-old churches have been built upon and renovated. Seats have been placed, so it looks sort of like a miniature of a cathedral, or of what we think of as a church. But in the old days, as you saw in Borgrund Stave Church, it was basically a room where people came in and stood and listened to a priest speaking in Latin, so they didn't even understand the priest, and it looked like pillars, and the front room sort of maybe with a curtain, so they didn't even see the priest. The first Christians in Norway were of the Roman Catholic version. That means that the people inside were actually standing there listening to a man behind a cloth in Latin, and they didn't understand anything, yet they were like in some way forced to go there and listen to that. And it's an odd thing to think that how a religion actually spread out without people knowing or understanding the words in the book, or understanding even the preachers or teachers of the religion. It wasn't until I'm not sure, Protestantism and Calvinism and all that they began to translate and make it accessible for people. Speaking about the Christianization of Norsemen, the methods of how the desert religion of Christianity was spread here in Scandinavia, like here on the sign, I forgot to mention that was his name Saint Olaf?
I think so.
Yeah, so saint, a good person. It's funny how saints become saints even though they were genocidal people. So basically they took their own people, they burned down their villages, and just forced them to convert, and took them as prisoners. So that's why it took some time for this region to become totally under the slavehood of the Roman Catholic Church at that time. And I can't imagine anywhere where Christianity and any of those desert religions spread out without violence. Even Buddhism spread out with violence. On the Indian flag you have the symbol of King Ashoka. The story goes that he was a fierce warrior, commander, a king. He was really brutal and genocidal. So, and then suddenly he realized something and began to walk the enlightened path of the Buddha. So he changed totally. But even if that did happen, Buddhism was still it's easier to conquer with religion than with having to send forces and troops into every corner of the realm which you are trying to take control of. So Buddhism spread out with violence, and all of those desert religions spread out with violence. Islam spread during the days of the Prophet. We can say that Jesus was maybe the most peaceful one during his life, and the first of the desert religions really spread out with violence and genocides occurring all of the time. So I wonder if these natural religions or belief systems that were formed, like with people living in their communities and engaging in their daily lives with nature and all that, what we call pagan religion, or it's not a religion, but all those unclassified, I think it's this right turn. Ja, det är det här till höger. Där är det. So that's that. I want to mention that because even in the Balkans, the religions spread out violently. Every one of them. Yeah. So find a true European within you and let go of the desert chains. What's amazing, I think, is in the Borgrund you can actually get a sense of how maybe an ancient Norse hall or main temple may have looked like, sort of with the pillars and the architecture, the style. These are churches, they are Christian, but you can still see the Norse style to it. People were still Vikings in a sense. You don't Christianize a region within 200 years. You know, there are still leftovers in style and in art. So in Borgund Stave Church, there's even a face of what is perhaps Odin on one side. These pillars are also inside the church. It's too dark to get a good image of it. You can see them there. So what they did is that they took the tree and sculpted it, and then they let it stand like that for 8 years. And by then, you know, with the tree still being rooted in the ground, it sort of developed a natural protection for wind, rain, and those kind of circumstances. So it got rough, and when it was time, they just cut it down and used it for construction. If you just imagine then how magical these regions were back in the days, like if you came up with a ship there or you traveled, and you know there was no roads, much less farming, and maybe on a day like this and you saw fire or smoke, and there were all sorts of buildings that perhaps looked like this, some simpler of course for the poor people, some for the common people, and some for the dukes and the rich people. Morning in Loom next to the Stave Church, which has a fantastic fragrance from the smoked wood, the facade. It fills the whole graveyard in this morning light under the shade of this tree. Amazing.